The square was nearly empty that gray afternoon. The wind blew dry leaves along the sidewalk as Hailey, shoulders hunched and eyes glassy, clutched a resignation letter between her fingers. It had been a long day, and the world felt far too small for her broken dreams. She sat on the old wooden bench she used to visit with her mother as a child. Now, sitting there alone, everything felt colder. It wasn't just about the job. It was the weight of so many no's, so many efforts that led nowhere. Hailey had always believed that hard work was enough, but the late rent, the empty fridge, and her sick father's disappointed gaze made her question everything. Just a little longer, she kept telling herself. But even hope seemed tired. On the opposite bench, a man was quietly watching the gentle sway of the branches. He wore simple clothes, yet something in his posture didn't match what he was wearing. Tall, with a restrained expression and eyes that hid 1,000 unspoken words. He seemed disconnected from the world, or perhaps running from it. And then, out of nowhere, he stood and walked toward Hailey's bench. She shrank slightly, surprised, but didn't look away. He sat down at a respectful distance, saying nothing, simply staring at the ground for a moment. It was as if he too was running from something. The silence between them was heavy, yet oddly comforting, as if the city's noise had quieted just to listen to that shared pause. Hailey discreetly wiped her eyes. She hated crying in public, but there was something about this stranger that made it feel safe not to hide. Without turning his head, he said, "Seems like it's not an easy day for either of us." His voice was deep, but gentle. She looked up, surprised, and felt something unexpected, the urge to respond. "I lost my job," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "And you?" she asked, against all logic. "I lost someone, a long time ago, but sometimes it still feels like yesterday." The words hung in the air, touching them both. It was strange how a stranger could feel more human than the people close to you. Hailey felt like she could breathe a little better sitting there. He offered a small, crooked smile, barely noticeable. "My name's Liam. And you?" "Hailey. Just Hailey," she replied with a tired half-smile. He didn't ask anything else, and somehow, that felt right. They sat in silence for a few more minutes. Neither of them was in a hurry. For the first time in a long while, the world seemed to slow down. People rushed by, but that bench felt untouched by time. Hailey closed her eyes for a second. The sound of the wind, footsteps, and his breathing. Everything seemed to fit. Liam stared at the ground, but saw Hailey from the corner of his eye. She wore no makeup. Her hair was tied carelessly, and her coat showed signs of wear. But there was strength in the way she held her posture, even as she fell apart inside. Something about her reminded him of someone he had lost. "Can I tell you something?" she asked suddenly. "Of course. I've never said this out loud, but I'm tired of pretending to be strong all the time," he simply replied. "Then don't pretend now." It hit Hailey hard. No one had ever given her permission to be fragile. The tears she'd been holding back all morning finally escaped in silence. Liam stayed still, respectful. He didn't touch her. He didn't try to console her, he just stayed, and that alone was more than most had ever done. "I used to come here with my mom," Hailey said after pulling herself together. "Is she still around?" "No. She died 3 years ago. Cancer, and ever since, everything's been harder. I know how that feels," Liam said without going into detail. Hailey met his eyes. For the first time, she noticed the sadness hidden there. A pain different from hers, but still familiar. It was as if they were both survivors of different losses carrying the same scars, and in that instant something invisible connected them. "Do you come here often?" she asked. "Sometimes, when I need to remember who I am." "And who are you?" "I'm still trying to figure that out." The silence returned, but this time it was intimate, almost warm. Night began to fall. The square's streetlights turned on, bathing them in a soft yellow glow. Hailey stood slowly. Thank you for letting me just be me, even when I don't know who that is right now. Sometimes it's with a stranger that we see ourselves the most, he replied. She smiled, a shy but genuine smile. Liam remained seated, watching her walk away. When she turned the corner, he gently touched the bench where she'd sat, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside. He didn't know why it affected him so deeply. Maybe because she hadn't treated him like a problem or a solution. Maybe because she saw him, even without knowing who he was. And that, for someone like Liam, was rare. Very rare. That night, Hailey fell asleep for the first time in weeks without crying, and Liam returned to his luxurious home where no one was waiting, carrying one name in his mind: Hailey. He didn't know it yet, but something had changed, and that square would only be the beginning. In the silent early morning, Liam stood by the glass windows of his penthouse watching the city. The lights below seemed too far from real life, the life he had tasted in that square. He thought of Hailey, the way she stayed strong while falling apart. Something about her disarmed him. For the first time in years, he wished to be seen not as a CEO, but as a man. On the other side of the city, Hailey was writing in her old notebook, the one where she used to jot down ideas for community projects that never saw the light of day. Tonight, for the first time, she wrote about someone. Liam, the stranger who didn't ask anything but heard everything. She felt strangely light, as if a single ray of light had pierced through her clouds. Maybe life still had good surprises. As the clock struck 3:42 a.m., two people in two different places looked up at the sky, unaware that they were thinking about each other. The connection born in silence was already planting invisible roots. And though the world outside remained noisy and indifferent, something precious had been born on that quiet park bench. Something neither of them would fully understand until it was too late to stop. The days passed with the slow drag typical of difficult weeks. Hailey carried on with her delivery runs and odd jobs, trying to scrape together enough to pay the rent for the room she lived in. But every afternoon, around 5, she walked by the square. It was as if something about that bench kept calling her back. She didn't know if she would see Liam again, but the thought of him made the day feel a little lighter. And on one clear-skied afternoon, there he was, sitting, staring at the horizon as if he somehow knew she would come. She hesitated for a second, but her feet moved forward on their own. When she got closer, he looked up and offered that same quiet smile, the kind that made the world seem almost bearable. Hailey sat beside him without saying a word. She didn't need to. The silence between them was full of meaning, a connection that required no effort, as if their pain spoke the same language. And there, in that silent exchange, the reunion began. "I thought maybe you wouldn't come back," he said finally. "So did I, but something pulled me here." That happens with places that hold real moments. She nodded, eyes on the ground. "And with people too," she added, without looking at him. Liam turned his gaze away, moved by her words. It was strange how Hailey could see beyond what he showed. He was used to hiding, to playing roles. But with her, there was no need. It was unsettling, but freeing. Hailey, for her part, was used to expecting nothing from anyone, but something about him stirred her curiosity, as if he carried answers she didn't even know she was seeking. "Why do you come here?" she asked, watching the birds pecking at the ground ahead. "Because this is one of the few places where nothing is expected of me." "And why is that so important?" "Because sometimes, being who others expect you to be hurts more than being no one." Hailey said nothing. That sentence echoed, deep. And she knew he was speaking of something far greater. In the days that followed, that bench became a fixed point in their fractured routines. They didn't set a time, didn't send messages, but somehow they met there, as if fate respected that sacred space. Some days they talked for hours, others they just watched the sunset, She brought coffee in a paper cup. He brought a chocolate bar. Small gestures, quiet presence, and little by little, it became the best part of their day. "What do you do? For work?" she asked one afternoon, more out of curiosity than interest. Liam hesitated. "A few companies. Consulting. Nothing exciting." It was a lie, or half a truth, but he didn't want her to know. Not yet. Hailey sensed it but didn't push. She had learned that some wounds aren't shared in the first act, and something in his eyes asked for time. Still, with every word they exchanged, a piece of Liam began to fall. An invisible armor cracked. He found himself waiting for her, thinking about her, remembering her subtle smiles and the way she looked at the sky when she didn't know what to say. Hailey was ordinary, but extraordinarily alive, and that terrified him. One afternoon she arrived early, sat alone on the bench and waited. For the first time he was late. And when he finally showed up, his face slightly bruised, Hailey jumped to her feet. "What happened to you?" "Nothing serious, an old fight." "With who?" "With my past," he said, giving a sad smile. She didn't understand, but she felt it. Liam had visited his brother's grave that morning. A car accident. A fight before the tragedy. A guilt that never left. He didn't tell Hailey about it, but something in the way she cared made him want to. For the first time, he considered sharing his pain, not to be understood, but to not carry it alone. And there, between falling leaves and flickering lights, he began to soften. "Do you believe in second chances?" he asked suddenly. "That depends." "A second chance for who? The one who suffered or the one who made the mistake?" "For the one who made the mistake." Hailey thought for a moment. "I do, but only if there's truth." Liam nodded, and held on to that answer like a secret. That night, Hailey returned home with an unease in her chest. He made her feel alive, seen, but also confused. There was something he wasn't saying, and she felt it strongly, like someone who senses a truth nearby but can't yet reach it. She lay in her narrow bed staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what this sad-eyed stranger was awakening in her. But maybe her heart knew before her mind did. Across town, Liam stared at his computer screen. Contracts, mergers, reports, everything felt empty. He shut it all down and walked to the balcony, took a deep breath and asked himself, why can't I stop thinking about her? Maybe because she treated him like no one else did. Maybe because he had everything. Except the one thing Hailey carried without even knowing: truth. That weekend, Hailey didn't show up. Liam sat there, waiting more than he wanted to admit. He watched the bench, the clock, the sky. Nothing. A tightness in his chest returned, one he hadn't felt since childhood. He went home with a heart heavier than expected. He realized that, somewhere along the way, he had stopped being just a stranger. And that scared him more than any risky investment. On Monday, when he saw her walking down the sidewalk with her hair loose and a book in her hands, something settled inside him. "I thought you gave up on the square," he said, trying to sound casual. "I was testing if you'd come even without me." He laughed. "And you passed the test," Hailey said, sitting beside him, and they laughed together for the first time. A real laugh, like two people who knew life was hard, but could still surprise you. The square became more than a meeting point. It became a safe space. And as the sun set, a new chapter was written in silence. One full of secrets, unspoken promises, and a story on the verge of exploding in truths. Because love was already waiting in the wings. That night, as Liam lay in his huge, quiet bed, Hailey's face wouldn't leave his mind. He remembered the way she furrowed her brow when something moved her, and how her eyes always seemed ready to cry, or laugh, depending on the moment. It was all so simple, and yet so profound. He, who had access to the most luxurious places, couldn't find there the same peace he felt sitting beside her on an ordinary bench, and that was dangerous, because the closer he got, the harder it would be to hide who he truly was. And Liam knew the truth wouldn't come without consequences. On Hailey's side, the feeling was mutual. She knew Liam was hiding important parts of himself, but there was something in his silence that didn't feel like deceit, but pain. She respected that. But she had also learned not to hold on to people who came and went like the wind. Still, something about Liam stayed. In the quiet smile, the effortless kindness, the way he truly listened. It wasn't attraction, it was connection. And for someone like Hailey, that was even rarer. One day, as they said goodbye, Liam held her wrist a second longer. A subtle gesture, but intense. "You deserve to be looked at like someone who matters," he said, without hesitation. Hailey stood frozen for a few seconds, staring into those sad eyes that, for the first time, seemed to shine. She didn't respond with words, just nodded, swallowing hard. And inside, something in her began to shift too. Because for the first time, she felt truly seen. And that was more dangerous than falling in love. But it was already too late to go back. They both knew it, even if they didn't yet have the courage to name what they were feeling. The square was no longer just a place. It was the bond. The stage of a connection growing between silences, coffees, and hidden truths. But secrets never stay buried forever, and Liam's was about to be uncovered. It was a sunny Wednesday when Hailey decided to do something different. She brought 2 coffees in thermal cups and stopped by a street bookstore to buy a small book of poems. She knew Liam wasn't the type to open up easily, but maybe someone else's words could help him find his own. When she saw him from a distance, already sitting on the bench, something inside her stilled. The entire city seemed to slow down in that moment. And as she got closer, she noticed he was smiling. Before he even saw her, that alone broke something inside her. "I brought coffee," she said, handing him the cup with a small ribbon tied around it. Liam raised an eyebrow. "Is this a gift?" "It's an excuse to keep coming here." He laughed, accepting the coffee with silent gratitude. They sat side by side, as if it were already an old habit. And for a few minutes, they just sat there, feeling the wind. "What did you do before all this?" he asked, not looking directly at her. Hailey thought for a moment. "Lots of things. Sales clerk, elderly caregiver, event assistant. But what I truly love is working with people. Social projects, education, active listening. Why don't you pursue that?" She sighed. "Because no one funds dreams that don't turn a profit." And inside, Liam felt his stomach twist. Hailey didn't know it, but Liam was one of the top investors in foundations and startups across the country. The kind of man who could decide the fate of projects like hers in minutes. The contrast stung, and hearing her speak with such sincere passion made him want to tell her he could fund not just one project but an entire life. But he didn't. Because for the first time, someone was getting close without knowing. The name splashed across headlines, and he didn't want to ruin that. "Not yet." "And you?" she asked after a pause. "I like reading, walking with no destination. Sometimes I help with family business." It was a half-truth, the closest to honesty he could get in that moment. Hailey nodded. She didn't press. And that's what unsettled him. Because Liam was used to being interrogated, not welcomed. They talked about books, about childhood, about songs that reminded them of people they'd lost. Hailey spoke about her mother and how she taught her to find beauty in simple things. Liam, for the first time, talked about his younger brother, who died in a car accident. He didn't say he was the one driving, or that he was the only one who survived, but his eyes said enough. And Hailey, as always, understood. Not with questions, but with presence. "I didn't know guilt could hurt this much," he confessed, staring ahead. "Guilt isn't meant to be carried, Liam, it's meant to be cared for. What if there's no way to fix it? Even then, you still deserve peace." The silence that followed was painful but healing, and in that moment she wished she could hug him. But she stayed, and for him, that was everything. At the end of the day, Hailey handed him the book of poems with a handwritten note inside. "For when words escape you, may you find them here." Liam read it, unable to speak. He held the book like a treasure, and she walked away with a light heart, never knowing that simple gesture would both shatter and rebuild him at once. It was just a gift, but it was more than he'd been given in a long time. That same night, a photo appeared on a local blog. Liam sitting with a woman on a park bench. Hailey's face slightly blurred, but visible. The headline read, "Liam, Prescott, the invisible heir, seen in intimate moment with unknown woman." He froze. The past he'd kept hidden was about to collide with the present. And this time, someone innocent would pay the price. The next morning, Hailey noticed the different looks at the cafe where she worked temporarily. A coworker pulled her aside and showed her the article. The blood drained from her face. Liam Prescott, heir to a billionaire empire. She blinked, trying to piece it together. The man who shared coffee with her on a random bench was one of the richest men in the country. Everything seemed to crumble around her. She felt ridiculous, deceived, used, but mostly furious, not because of the money, but because of the lie. She had trusted him, opened wounds, and he hid everything. She went home unsure of what to do, unsure if she should go back to the square, or if she ever wanted to see him again. Liam, on the other hand, spent the day surrounded by emergency calls, PR handlers, and damage control attempts. But none of it mattered. He could only think of her, of the disappointed face that had probably already seen the photo, and of the very real possibility that he'd lost her forever. The mask had fallen, and with it the only peace he had found in years. By late afternoon, he went to the square, sat on the bench, holding the book of poems. He waited, and waited, but Hailey never came. The sky darkened slowly, and a cold breeze swept the fallen leaves. He ran his fingers over her dedication, and for the first time, cried in public. Meanwhile, Hailey wandered the city aimlessly, past storefronts she never had the courage to enter, streets where she once dreamed of walking hand in hand with someone. She didn't want a prince. She didn't need riches. She only longed for truth. And what hurt most was that Liam knew that, and still chose to hide. Back home, she turned on her old radio. A slow song filled the small room, and she sat on the floor. She didn't cry for him, but for herself, for believing, for letting go, even without admitting it, even without knowing how deep she already was. Liam was still on the bench alone when his driver found him. "Sir, shall we go?" He shook his head. "Tell them you didn't find me." "But what about Miss Hailey?" Liam closed his eyes tightly. "Maybe she'll never want to see me again." But he wouldn't give up. Not yet. Because now, he knew what was real. And no matter how much it hurt, he needed to earn back the trust he broke, even if it was the last thing he ever did. Because for the first time, he had something to lose. The next morning, Hailey woke to her phone buzzing. An unexpected message. "I messed up, and I know I may not deserve a second chance. But if one day you want to hear everything, I'll be on that bench. Liam." She read it over and over, her heart torn between the pain and the memory of all they had shared. She didn't know what was stronger, the sting of betrayal, or the desire to believe there was more behind his silence. She took a deep breath, staring at her own reflection in the mirror. It still hurt, but a part of her wanted answers. Across the city, Liam was already on the bench, trembling hands clutching the book she had given him. The sun had barely risen and he had no idea how long he'd wait. But he would wait. Pride, fame, the empire, none of it mattered now. Hailey had seen the man behind the name, and he needed her to know. That version was real. No masks, no contracts. Just him, waiting maybe for the last time to be forgiven. Hailey walked through the streets as if each step weighed more than the last. The square was only 2 blocks away, but it felt like a continent. She still didn't know if she'd go through with it. She only knew she needed to look Liam in the eyes and understand. Understand how someone who said so little could stir so much inside her. The city rushed around her, but inside everything was in slow motion. When she turned the last corner, she saw him there, on the bench, head down, a book in his hands. Liam sensed her presence without looking. His heart sped up instantly, but he didn't move. When Hailey stopped in front of him, they stood in silence for a few seconds. She looked beautiful despite the dark circles under her eyes. Her gaze was steady, her posture firm. It was clear she hadn't come for comfort. She had come for answers. "So it's true," she said, her tone almost neutral. "It is. You're Liam Prescott." "Yes, but that's not who I wanted to be with you." Hailey crossed her arms, trying to hold back the lump in her throat. "You had so many chances to tell me. Why didn't you?" "Because, for the first time, someone saw me before the name. And you destroyed that. I was trying to protect what we were building. By lying, by hiding. I was afraid of losing the only place where I could just be me." She sat beside him, but not too close. There was distance between their bodies and their hearts. "You know what hurts the most? Tell me. I trusted you. I told you things I've never told anyone. I did too, Hailey, but I didn't know how to be truthful without losing you. You lost me anyway." "I know." Liam took a deep breath. "I want to tell you everything. No filters. No excuses." Hailey stared at him for a moment. "Why now?" "Because now you know who I am out there. And even so, you're here. I'm here for me. Because I deserve to understand." "Then ask. Anything." Hailey looked at the ground. "Do you really have an empire?" "Not by choice. My father died young and I was pushed into leading it." "And the accident with your brother?" Liam froze for a second. "I was the one driving. He wanted to go home and I insisted we go out that night. I wasn't drunk, but I sped. It was raining. And he died. In my arms." She closed her eyes for a moment. "That doesn't justify lies." "No. But maybe it explains why I'm afraid to get close. You thought keeping me away from your truth would let you keep me near." "Exactly. And do you realize that's the opposite of love?" "I do. Now I do." The silence between them grew heavier. Hailey sighed. "I don't know if I can trust you again." "I'm not asking for that, not now." "Then what are you asking for?" "A chance to rebuild slowly through actions." "And what if I say I don't want this anymore?" Liam lowered his head. "I'll understand. But even so, I'll keep coming here." Hailey bit her lip. She wasn't expecting that answer. There was truth in his voice, a rare kind of humility. Maybe he really was trying to change, or maybe she just wanted to believe. Suddenly, a group of photographers appeared in the distance. One of them recognized Liam and shouted. In seconds, cameras were raised. Hailey jumped to her feet, startled. Liam stood beside her. "Give me your hand," he said firmly. "For what?" "To show I'm not hiding anymore." She hesitated, but reached out. The flashes exploded, but Liam only saw her face. And for a second, Hailey forgot the world was watching. It was just the two of them, again. After the reporters were pushed back, Liam took her to a quiet cafe. "No one will follow you, I swear, I've shut it all down." "You always had that kind of power?" "Always, but I never knew how to use it to truly protect someone." "Then start now." He nodded. And there, between warm coffee and trembling hands, something began again. In the days that followed, Liam gave strict orders to his team. No more media exposure about Hailey. She in turn went back to volunteering at the children's shelter. She wanted to stay grounded, but deep down, she thought of him at every turn. Liam couldn't go back to his old life either. The bench now felt empty without her. But it carried the promise of a new beginning. On Sunday, he showed up at the shelter with gloves, paint, and an anonymous donation to fund the entire renovation. Hailey saw him painting walls with the kids. No photographers, no PR stunts, just him being real. And something inside her softened again. Because even without words, he was saying everything, this time with actions. Hailey watched from a distance as Liam wiped his hands on a paint-stained rag, laughing with one of the children. There were no bodyguards, no expensive suits, no stiff posture of the man from the headlines, just a simple man, sleeves rolled up with a calm expression. And in that moment she realized he was trying, not out of guilt, but by choice. A choice written not in promises, but in actions. And that made her waver inside. She walked toward him, unsure of what to say. Liam saw her and instinctively straightened up. "This looks beautiful, what you're doing here," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "The place needed it. I just thought I could help." "You helped more than you know. I'm not trying to impress you, Hailey. I want to respect you. Then keep showing up, and not just here." Liam nodded, with a nearly shy smile. "Thank you for not pushing me away when it would have been easy. I still don't trust you, but I see you trying. And I'll keep trying, even if it takes a lifetime." She looked at him. "Then start from the beginning. Hi, I'm Liam. I like coffee, poetry, and hearing your voice." She smiled for the first time in days. A small smile, but genuine. And for Liam, it was more valuable than any signed contract. They spent the rest of the day side by side, painting, listening to music, serving the kids. No rush, no promises, just presence. And in the simplicity, something new was born, something not even the past could erase. By late afternoon, as they cleaned the brushes, Hailey took his hand for a moment. "This doesn't mean everything's okay. I know, but it means maybe we still have time." Liam gently squeezed her fingers. "As long as you want me here, I will be." She looked at him. "Then come tomorrow, even if it rains." That night, Hailey went home with her hands still stained with paint, but her heart a little cleaner. She felt light, in a way she hadn't in a long time. It wasn't full forgiveness, nor a declaration of love. It was a truce. And for someone who had always had to defend herself from the world, that was already a huge beginning. She turned on her bedside lamp, opened her notebook, and wrote, "Some apologies don't come with flowers. They come with presents." And then she smiled to herself. For the first time, the name Liam Prescott no longer scared her. Across town, Liam walked up the stairs to his apartment barefoot, his hair messy. He didn't want to take the elevator. He wanted to feel the fatigue in his body, to remember, with every step, that he was walking into a different kind of life. When he got in, he took off the blazer hanging on the chair and put on the t-shirt he wore at the shelter. It smelled of paint and children's laughter. And strangely, he liked it. He placed the book of poems on the table, and his heart on hope. The next day, rain was in the forecast. But Liam arrived at the square early, holding 2 coffees and an umbrella. Hailey arrived 20 minutes later, wearing a simple raincoat and her hair tied back. He stood before she said anything. "You came." "I said I would, even in the rain." "You still have a lot to prove," she replied, taking the coffee. But the light in her eyes said it all. She wanted to be there. They talked for over an hour, uninterrupted. The world around them seemed to bend to their reunion. Liam spoke of childhood, fears, and expectations he never managed to meet. Hailey shared stories of nights with only rice for dinner, but still writing about better futures. He was enchanted by how she turned pain into compassion. She admired the way he slowly unveiled his soul. They were rediscovering each other. Again, for real. The calm of the last few days felt almost too promising for Hailey, and she knew, by instinct or experience, that life rarely allowed peace for too long. The connection with Liam was growing silently, but genuinely. It was like walking barefoot, on a gravel road. Every step hurt, but it was worth it. He came every day, helped at the shelter, listened to the kids, and heard her stories as if they were the only ones that mattered. More and more, Hailey no longer saw him as the man who lied, but as the man who chose to change. But truly trusting him was still a step her heart hesitated to take. The shadow of doubt still lingered in the clear days, and it became undeniable when Amanda showed up. Tall, elegant, blonde, Liam's ex-fiancée, and determined to win him back. Hailey saw her for the first time at the shelter gate. A luxury car, expensive perfume, and the smile of someone who never heard the word no. "I'm here to pick up Liam," she said bluntly. "He's busy," Hailey replied. "Says the shelter janitor?" Amanda laughed, biting. Hailey simply closed the gate, but the wound was wide open. Liam found out the same day. He arrived at Hailey's apartment with a tense face. She shouldn't have done that, but she did. "I ended things with Amanda long before I met you. But you never truly pushed her away, did you?" "Hailey, I just need to know if there's still space for her." "No, only for you." She wanted to believe him, but Amanda's visit planted seeds of insecurity that were hard to uproot. Hailey had never cared about wealth, but now she found herself comparing clothes, words, even tone of voice. Her pride screamed not to show it, but her heart bled silently. Liam could feel something in her had shifted, but he didn't know how to heal what Amanda had broken with a venomous smile. He tried insisting, tried talking, but Hailey slowly began to pull away. The visits to the shelter became less frequent, the messages shorter. Liam waited at the square bench for hours like in the early days, and Hailey didn't show up. Not out of anger, but out of fear. Fear of loving and being forgotten, of trusting and being replaced, of believing and falling. It was the same fear Liam carried, but they faced it in opposite ways. He drew closer. She ran, and the distance between them grew, even between hearts that longed to be near. One Sunday, Hailey's father came to visit. "You okay, sweetheart?" "I'm trying. Sometimes we sabotage ourselves when we need love the most. And what if it's not love? If it hurts this much, it is." She hugged her father tightly, and she knew he was right. That same day, a storm hit the city, but Liam was determined to find her. He went through every place they'd shared. The cafe, the square, the shelter, all empty. Finally, he climbed the stairs to her apartment building. When Hailey opened the door, the cold wind rushed into the hallway. "You're soaked," she said, startled. "I'm desperate." "For what?" "Because I'm losing you, and I don't know how to live without having you near." Hailey looked at him, drenched, shivering, yet with the most sincere eyes she had ever seen. "I don't know if I can trust again." "Then trust what you feel." "And what if that's not enough?" "Then we build it, brick by brick." She hesitated, but she didn't close the door. And that was a beginning. He stepped in, took off his shoes, and stood on the small rug in her living room. "I've met so many people in the world, Hailey, but no one like you. I'm just me. And that's exactly what scares me." "Why?" "Because you see who I am without wanting anything in return. And you think you don't deserve that?" Liam sat on the couch, his shoulders tense. "I was trained to win, not to feel. And now? Now I want to feel, even if it breaks me." Hailey sat beside him. "I don't need promises. And I only want to give you truths." At that moment, the sound of rain against the window was the only soundtrack. Two broken hearts, two whole presences, a silence full of meaning. Hailey rested her head on his shoulder. "You can stay." "And what if I never want to leave?" She looked at him, her eyes still full of doubt, but also hope. "Then stay, but prove it to me every day." "I promise." I said, "No promises." "Right. Then I'll show you." And with a kiss on her forehead, he said more than any words could, The next morning, Liam woke before sunrise. He made coffee and left a note on the table. "Today I'm going back to the shelter. If you want to see me, you know where to find me." Hailey read the note with a small smile. For the first time, her fear wasn't louder than her desire to try. And when she stepped out the door, her heart wasn't running. It was walking toward him. That afternoon, the shelter was busier than usual. It was community cleanup day and many families had come to help. Hailey arrived with a nervous heart but a firm step. The smell of fresh paint, the sound of children playing, everything felt more alive, as if the space knew something important was about to happen. And there, among laughter and colors, she saw Liam, kneeling, helping a little girl plant seedlings in the garden. His hands were dirty, but his eyes were clean. Hailey approached slowly. Liam saw her and stood up by reflex. They looked at each other for a second that seemed to last forever. Neither said a word. She picked up a gardening glove, knelt beside him, and together they began to plant. No words, no grand gestures, just side by side. Her presence was the forgiveness he had longed for, and the silence between them was at last one of peace. "I think we make a good team," he said softly. Hailey smiled without looking up. "We're still learning to play on the same side, and I'm willing to train every day." She glanced at him. "Just don't forget, it's a fair game here. Never again." At the end of the day, everyone gathered for a light snack. Children laughed, adults exchanged stories, and Hailey watched Liam blend in naturally. He was different there. Not the man in suits, not the millionaire in magazines. Just Liam, whole, vulnerable, present. And for the first time, she saw a future with him not as a threat, but as a possible home. Something real, something not ready-made but built. And maybe that made it stronger. As they said goodbye, he walked her to the gate. "Thank you for today, for coming back." "I didn't come back. I chose to stay." "And the fear? It's still here." "And the love? It's learning to be bigger." Liam held her hand, gently, without saying anything else. She walked to the bus stop with her heart warm. She knew there would still be hard days, doubts, and tests. But she also knew he had chosen to change, and she had chosen to stay. It was the beginning of something mature, brave, imperfect, and that was exactly what she needed. On the bus, she rested her head against the window and smiled. Because sometimes, love means this, to stop running, and to allow someone to stay. Liam returned home with his hands still stained with soil. He sat on the living room floor, opened the notebook he had barely used in his life, and began. "Today I learned that love doesn't shout. It insists, it plants, it waits. And just when you think it's too late, it blooms." He smiled to himself, because now he understood. And this time, he wouldn't let her run again, because now he would run with her. On Monday, the shelter was quiet when Liam arrived. Unlike other days, he wasn't wearing casual clothes. He wore a dark suit, hair perfectly styled, and carried a briefcase in his hands. The children noticed. So did Hailey. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No. Today is the day I put who I am in service of what I believe in." She frowned, confused. "Come with me," he said, guiding her to the shelter's small auditorium. Liam stepped onto the makeshift stage and called all staff and volunteers. Using a simple projector, he began the presentation. "A few months ago, I found this place, and I didn't just find a building, I found a purpose." Hailey watched him, heart pounding. He wasn't just speaking, he was delivering. Spreadsheets, proposals, partnerships. Liam had structured a foundation, and the shelter would be its first official project. "Everything will be done in your name, without my image, without my signature. The foundation will be called Living Roots, Because some stories deserve to grow, even in tough soil. Everyone applauded, deeply moved. Hailey felt her eyes fill with tears. He wasn't standing there as an heir. He was the man she met on a park bench. After the presentation, Liam stepped down and walked over to Hailey. "This is my gesture, not to impress you, but to show you I understand." She tried to respond, but words failed. She simply hugged him, right there, in front of everyone. And he knew he had done the right thing. That afternoon, the newspapers reported the gesture, but without headlines. At Liam's request, the press received only an official statement. Giving is a silent act, and when it's born from truth, it doesn't need to be seen, only felt. Hailey read the note more than once. He really had changed, and the most beautiful part was, he wasn't doing it for her. He was doing it because he had transformed, and that moved her more than any promise. Later that day, they walked together along the sidewalk near a nearby school. Children were releasing paper balloons with handwritten wishes. "What would you write if you were one of them?" Hailey asked. Liam thought for a few seconds. "I want to keep deserving the love I've found." She stopped walking. "That's how you feel?" "Since the first day, when you were crying on that bench." She didn't reply. She simply held his hand, firmly. And they kept walking in silence, the soft sounds of children behind them. It was curious how their love grew between small gestures and bold decisions, a balance between tenderness and courage. Hailey was beginning to realize she no longer needed to run, and Liam that he no longer needed to prove anything, just stay, and that they were learning to do together. That night, in Hailey's small room, they sat on the floor with 2 cups of tea. "Do you remember our first meeting?" she asked. "You were crying, and I was trying to stay whole. And now I want to cry with you, laugh with you, build with you." Hailey smiled. "That's scary." "I know, but it's worth it." She looked him in the eyes, steady. "Don't promise me anything, Liam." "No, I'll just do it. And if we mess up, then we start again." She took a deep breath. "Then stay." "I already have," he said, resting his forehead against hers. In the days that followed, their routine found balance. Liam split his time between discreet meetings and afternoons at the shelter. Hailey, now more confident, began coordinating social projects. Together, they became a rare example of something powerful: love with purpose. There was no display, no rehearsed speeches, only actions, only daily choice. And that's what united them. More than passion, belonging. One Saturday, a little girl at the shelter got hurt from a fall in the yard. Hailey rushed to help her, and Liam followed. The two worked in perfect sync, cleaning the wound, calming her cries. "You're good with kids," Hailey said, surprised. "I never had the chance." "Now you do. Then I want to make the most of it." She smiled, eyes glassy. That was when she saw the real man. The past still existed, of course. Amanda made one last attempt to reach out, but Liam was firm. "There's no more room." "You don't belong with her, Liam. You're made of power, not gentleness." "Then maybe I was never who you thought." And he hung up. After that, Amanda's silence was final. And peace finally came. At the end of that month, the foundation was officially launched. Hailey was invited to be the general coordinator. "It's your work, your vision, not just my funding," Liam said. She accepted proudly. It was more than a role. It was the recognition of everything she had always carried: strength, empathy, and vision. And now, finally, space to blooms. Cameras discreetly recorded the event. Hailey gave a simple speech. This foundation was born from a gesture, but not from one man alone. It was born from the meeting of 2 people who decided to stop running and opened themselves to build. Liam watched her, moved. She spoke with firmness, with truth. And in that moment, he knew. It was her. It had always been her. At the end of the ceremony, the two embraced in silence on the center of the small stage. The crowd applauded. But to them, everything around was just noise. All that mattered was the embrace, the touch, the calm breath of two people who had survived their own pain. It wasn't the end of the story. It was a restart. It was love saying, "Now we're ready." And in that gesture, everything changed. Not because they said, "I love you," but because they proved it. That night, back in the small apartment, Hailey sat next to Liam on the narrow couch. The lights were off except for a soft lamp that lit their tired but peaceful faces. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. Their hands, intertwined, said it all. He looked at her with a mix of admiration and respect. Not because she was perfect, but because she was whole, true, and because she had helped him find parts of himself that had been asleep for years. Hailey, in silence, was grateful that he stayed. "Can I ask you something?" she whispered. "Always. Did you ever imagine this? Us here now? Not even in a dream. I didn't think I deserved it. And now? Now I just want to deserve it. Every single day." She rested her head on his chest, and the world outside stopped. Across the city, the foundation building now bore a new sign. Living Roots, Coordinator, Hailey Moore. And it was more than a title. It was a symbol of everything she had overcome. The girl who once cried alone on a park bench now led a project that would change lives. And the man who once watched from afar, his eyes full of guilt, was now part of the building. Not as a savior, but as a partner. And that made all the difference. Hailey woke the next morning to the sound of rain tapping gently against the window. Liam was still asleep beside her, his expression peaceful. She watched him for a few minutes, as if confirming her choice. Then, she reached for her notebook and wrote, "He never promised me anything, but in everything he does, he stays." She closed the notebook with a smile. She knew their love wasn't perfect. It was real. And that was enough. The foundation grew, their love matured, and life, for the first time in a long while, felt safe. But fate still held trials in store. Because every real love story must face the test of the unexpected. And when the next night fell, Liam and Hailey would have to decide whether they only knew how to love, or also how to fight, and that decision would change everything. The sky was overcast when Hailey left the foundation headquarters that late afternoon. In her hands, she carried reports, scribbled ideas, and the good kind of exhaustion that comes from doing what you love. But something felt off, a heaviness in the air too thick for a living city. When she arrived at the shelter, she saw tense movement. 2 children were crying. One of the educators pulled her by the arm. "Hailey, we have a problem." "What happened?" "Chloe is missing." Chloe was a quiet 9-year-old girl, always watchful, barely speaking. She had only been there a short time. "She left after snack time. No one saw where she went." Hailey felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. "Have you called the police?" "Yes, they're on their way, but yesterday she said she wanted to run away." "Run away where?" "She said she was going to see her mom." And Hailey's heart clenched even tighter. She went out through nearby streets, asking, searching, praying silently. A cold, thin rain began to fall, when like a warning from the sky. Her phone rang. It was Liam. "What's going on?" "Chloe's missing. I'm looking for her." "Tell me where you are." "Behind the school near the train tracks." "Stay there, I'm coming now." Liam dropped everything, left an investor meeting halfway through and grabbed his car without thinking. On the way, he called contacts, asked for help, activated private security. But all he truly wanted was to get to Hailey. When he saw her, standing in the rain with soaked hair clinging to her face and red eyes, his chest ached. "Any news?" "Nothing yet. She's just a child, Liam. We'll find her. Together." They walked through dark streets, knocked, Undores entered alleys. Hailey shouted the girl's name, her voice breaking. Liam held her each time she nearly collapsed. Why would she run away? He asked, breathless. Because she thought no one would stay. She has you, but she doesn't know that yet. And Liam understood exactly how she felt. Suddenly, an older woman pointed toward the abandoned station at the end of the street. I saw a little girl go in there about 20 minutes ago. Hailey ran without thinking. Liam followed. Inside, the place was dark and damp. But then, they heard a sob. Soft. Real. Chloe? Hailey called. Another sob. She followed the sound and found the girl curled up behind a pile of old boxes. I didn't want to be a bother anymore, Chloe whispered. Hailey knelt on the wet ground and hugged the girl tightly. You're not a bother, you belong. Chloe cried softly, burying her face in Hailey's neck. Liam stood in silence, his heart in pieces. On the way back, inside the car, Chloe slept in Hailey's lap. You're amazing, Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. I just don't want anyone to feel what I felt. What? The feeling of being disposable. Liam looked at her. And that's what I fear the most, that one day, you'll feel that because of me. They returned to the shelter and safely handed Chloe over. Hailey stayed a while, waiting until the girl fell asleep. Then she stepped outside to the garden where Liam was waiting quietly. You were supposed to be in an important meeting, she said. I was exactly where I needed to be. She approached, eyes tired. Thank you for coming. Always. And what if one day I disappear? I'll come looking for you too, he replied without hesitation, even if I'm hard to find. Especially then. She took his hand. Today I realized that true love is the one that stays when everything falls apart. Then let me be that love. And Hailey just nodded, her eyes full. They returned home together in silence. Words weren't needed. The tension of the night, the fear, the protection, all had deepened something between them. Liam understood that loving Hailey wasn't just about building with her. It also meant running when she grew tired, being close when she pulled away. And Hailey realized that loving Liam meant accepting that even the strong fear losing. But real love doesn't run, it stays. The next morning, Chloe woke up feeling better. She smiled, for the first time in weeks. Hailey told her stories. Liam brought drawings. The children laughed, and in that shelter something solidified. A project born from care. A relationship growing out of chaos. And two hearts that now understood love is a choice, even in the middle of the storm. That weekend, sitting on the foundation's porch, Liam took Hailey's hand. I was afraid to love you, you know, and I was afraid to be loved. But now I know you'd stay if I disappeared, and I know you'd find me. They smiled, sharing the moment, and they knew they were ready for whatever came next. That night when they got home, Liam made dinner. Nothing fancy, just warm soup and fresh bread he picked up on the way. Hailey watched in silence as he set the small table, every gesture, speaking louder than words. She sat across from him, still quiet but full-hearted. It was in that simplicity that she saw love reveal itself, not through gifts, but presence. Not through promises, but through actions. And that was everything. You know you don't have to prove anything to me anymore, right? She said with a soft smile. I know, but I still want to. Why? Because proving it became a choice, not an obligation. And I want to keep choosing you. She looked at him tenderly, and inside something finally settled. After dinner, they sat on the porch with mugs of tea in hand. The rain had stopped, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. Hailey rested her head on Liam's shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her silently. The world might still be chaotic, but in that moment, there was peace. "Do you think every love needs to be tested to know it's real?" she asked. "I think love doesn't need to be tested, but it will be." "And did we pass?" "We chose to keep going. That's already a win." Liam kissed her forehead, then simply sat with her quiet, thinking about everything they'd been through: the park bench, the hidden truths, the tears, the reconciliations. Hailey wasn't just a love. She was a mirror, a second chance, and more than that, a living reminder that love isn't about control. It's about trust. He understood now. To love is to stay when you could leave, and to build when you could give up. That night before bed, Hailey wrote one more line in her notebook. "Today I didn't feel fear, just love, and that changes everything." She closed the notebook, turned off the light, and as she lay down, felt Liam's arms wrap around her, firm and gentle. That was where she wanted to be, not because it was easy, but because it was real, and because now, she knew she was no longer alone. Months had passed since the night Chloe was found. The Living Roots Foundation was thriving. The shelter gained new rooms, new volunteers, and more than anything, hope. Hailey now led with both strength and tenderness, and Liam had become a constant partner, present in every detail without ever overshadowing her. They had found a way to love that didn't confine, but supported. That didn't dim the other's light, but added to it. And in both their hearts there was peace, not from a lack of problems, but from the real presence of one another. Over time, the press grew tired of their story. The headlines faded, and they were able to live more lightly, away from the spotlight. Hailey moved out of her small apartment into a modest house with a garden. Liam, while still active in the corporate world, began filling his days with things that truly mattered. They were different, yes, but they had built a bridge. And every morning as they drank coffee together, they remembered their first conversation on that park bench. The beginning of everything, a restart for them both. One afternoon, while preparing an activity for the teens at the shelter, Liam came across an old notebook filled with Hailey's drawings. "You drew these?" "When I was a kid, I wanted to be an architect. But then, life happened. You can still be anything you want." She smiled. "I just want to be someone who makes a difference." "You already are," he said, eyes full of pride. The kids called them the hearts of the house. And it was true. There was something about them that transformed the entire place. It wasn't about over-the-top romance, but the way they cared for one another. Hailey remembered the nights she cried alone, doubting everything. Now she shared her days with someone who could see beyond words. And Liam, who had always feared being loved for what he had, was now loved for who he was. Vulnerable, imperfect human. One special afternoon, they hosted a simple celebration in the foundation's garden, a thank you to the community, volunteers, and the stories they'd saved. The children sang songs, read poems, shared drawings. At the end, a little girl handed Hailey a small box wrapped in recycled paper. Inside was a beaded bracelet with a red heart in the center. "It's for you, so you always remember that everyone here loves you," the girl said. Hailey cried silently, and Liam, holding her hand, cried too. That night, wrapped in blankets on their porch, the two talked about everything and nothing. The starry sky above echoed what they felt inside, a sense of belonging. "I've been thinking about something," Liam said. "Tell me. What if we stopped just being together and started building more?" "Like what?" "Like a home, a forever, our way." Hailey smiled, heart warm. "I'm in, as long as it's honest." There was no formal proposal, no ring, but there was a decision. As always, their love didn't follow a formula. It followed what was real. Months later, they bought a piece of land next to the shelter, and there, they built an open home, with a porch, a hammock, the smell of fresh coffee, and books everywhere. The first photo on the wall was of them sitting on the park bench, the second, surrounded by children, all smiling. And the third was just them, in an embrace that whispered, "We made it." Liam didn't stop being a businessman. Hailey didn't lose her essence, a strong, grounded woman. But together, they found the balance between purpose and affection. He learned that love requires consistency, not grandeur. And she realized that loving doesn't mean losing yourself. It means allowing yourself to grow alongside someone. And grow they did, side by side, for each other, with deep roots and freedom. ATDUIT, the Foundation's anniversary, Hailey gave a special speech. "When I first came here, I thought I had no place left in the world. But then I met someone who saw me, even when I felt invisible. He didn't save me. He stayed. And today I've learned that staying is the most beautiful verb in love." Liam watched her, eyes brimming with tears. And when she stepped off the stage, he whispered, "And I'll keep staying. Every single day." On the porch years later, with slightly graying hair, they sat with 2 cups of tea in their hands. The kids had grown up. The world kept turning. But they remained. On the wall, a hand-stitched frame read, "It wasn't luck, it was choice." And every night before bed, Liam would still say, "Thank you for staying that day." And Hailey would reply, "Thank you for coming back the next." The park bench still stood. Sometimes they'd return just to sit side by side in silence. Other times they'd bring the children from the shelter to show them where it all began. Liam would point and say, "This is where I found her." But, truth is, I was the one who was found. Hailey would simply smile, because she knew. True love begins where fear ends. Their story became an inspiration, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, made of pauses, returns, listening, effort, of 2 worlds that collided and chose to unite through steady roots and small gestures. And the most beautiful part was that despite everything, they never stopped being who they were. The ordinary, woman from humble beginnings, the man who learned to love without masks, and a love that endured even after the storms. In the final page of her old notebook, Hailey wrote, "I don't know where pain ends and love begins. All I know is that one day, as I cried on a park bench, someone sat beside me, and I never felt alone again." She closed the now worn notebook and placed it in a memory box. Life had changed, but the essence remained. Love, choice, presence. And so, through stumbles and new beginnings, they built something the world couldn't tear down, a love that was real, not the kind seen in perfect movies, but the kind that grows through pain, blossoms through choice, and stays through care. Hailey and Liam proved that no matter how much the past hurts, when 2 hearts commit to truth, even the most unlikely, paths become home. Their love wasn't fate, it was a decision, made day after day. They remind us that you don't need much to love with everything, that sometimes it all begins with one simple act, sitting beside someone in silence and staying. That listening is more powerful than promising, that healing is more beautiful than impressing, and that the real miracle is finding someone willing to take off the masks, just to be truly seen. Because in the end, what we all long for is this: to be loved exactly as we are. If this story touched your heart, it's because you too believe in the power of real love, the kind that can't be bought or flaunted, but is built through quiet gestures and constant presence. Maybe you cried, smiled, or remembered someone. And if that happened, it means this story fulfilled its purpose, to remind you that true love still exists. Don't keep this to yourself. Like the video if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs to believe in love again, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Stories that warm, heal, and show that what's real remains. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story, because sometimes all a person needs is to be seen. And here, every story is an invitation to believe that real love, even imperfect, still transforms lives, including yours. Come in and stay. This space is yours too.